and welcome to my channel, Bevy with Beth. This channel is dedicated to women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, but I am not a medical professional, nor am I a trained dietitian, so I just wanted to explain my journey from being diagnosed just over a year ago to this point now. I feel like I've done a lot of research and I've learned a lot in that journey, and I'd love to be able to share it with you, and maybe you could find something that you need to look into more or something that you would like to take to your doctor, but never make a major life change either with diet or with medication without first consulting your doctor. But with that being said, let's get right into it. So as I said, I was diagnosed just over a year ago with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So this channel is going to be talking about my journey and how I got here. And I'm hoping that I might be able to help some other people with the things that I've learned along the way. But it does mean that I'm going to be doing a lot of talking. So I thought if I included beverage in the name, then you'd understand that you need to come along and bring a drink. So I've got mine. This time it is a coffee, and I try and avoid dairy as much as I can, so I actually make mine with oat milk, and it is the Nescafe Azera brand, the Americano one that I am drinking at the moment. And I went out and bought some today because I thought I hadn't included it in my big Tesco's delivery order, and then received my Tesco's delivery order. And I did order some, so now I have 2 cans, but I think I'm probably going to be able to get through that. So go along, make yourself a drink, get yourself comfortable, and then we'll jump right into it. So I just wanted to explain to you why I decided to start a specific YouTube channel for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so I thought I'd start kind of with my YouTube journey, because although I am only 30 years old and I'm in the millennial generation, I've never been a massive YouTube user. I tended to kind of watch some of the BuzzFeed Ladylike videos, and that started probably about 18 months ago. And before then, other than a few how-to videos, I really hadn't been a big YouTube user. And then I started using it more and more for things that I was interested in, learning about different lifestyles and all that kind of thing. And then after I got diagnosed and I was using YouTube more, I suddenly thought, oh, why am I not using YouTube to understand my syndrome more? I just found that there wasn't a lot of research, and although my doctor was fairly supportive, I did need to do a lot of my own research in order to understand this. So I thought, oh, I know, I'll go onto YouTube, but there's bound to be hundreds of videos all about polycystic ovarian syndrome, what it is, how it works, how you can work with it. And at that point, I was also looking for how to cure it. So I took a little look, and there just wasn't anything. There were a couple of videos that girls had done where they had a channel and they did one video that was my PCOS journey, and they do one video on it and explain how they got diagnosed and how it's impacted their lives. But there was no real journey, there was no discovery of a medication or a diet or anything like that, which is what I was looking for at the time. And there were a couple of funny videos at the time from a nutritionist who was, making a joke about the side effects of PCOS, and so it was great and it was funny, and she had a lot of nutritional advice for women, but at that time she hadn't really focused her diets on polycystic ovaries, and there were lots of podcasts, and there's a lot of diet plans, and I found some people on Instagram, and I found a really great person called PCOS Diva, who I will link in the description down below, because she's given me a lot of information. But the problem I have is that I live in England, and she's based in America, and as great as everything that she does is, and as helpful as she has been, she's in America, so I can't follow her diet plan. I can't get the same supplements that she uses. And so although informationally it's supportive, it's not practically supportive. So I had to go out and I looked at the things that she recommended, and I did research on our products here in England. And I kind of had to piece that together myself. So I just got to a point where I thought, well, there really isn't anything at the moment. I mean, especially for women in Britain, but even for women in America who are looking for a kind of a conversational platform, rather than something that's just this is the answer. Because I found out, of course, that you can't cure polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's something that you have, and you are going to live with it for the rest of your life. And as you go through life and things change naturally, there's going to be things that you come up against. So I just felt like there were a lot of people saying, do this diet plan or do this exercise regime, but not a lot of people saying, let's just talk about this. So as I said, I'm not qualified in anything, so I can't provide any solutions for you, but I'd love to share my journey, my experiences, what I've learned, where I went to find that information, and when I've taken action, how it impacts on my life, and kind of just have a discussion with you guys about maybe the things that you're struggling with, things that you found that you think I can benefit from, so we can start sharing that information in a very realistic manner. And that's what I want this channel to be about. I want it to be about genuinely living with PCOS, how that impacts your life, how we can maybe improve it, the areas that make it really difficult. And I had a conversation with a colleague. I've just moved office, and turns out she also has PCOS. And although she was diagnosed a year ago, she's got a load of other dietary programming that she just needs to get out of in order to get to a healthier place specifically for her body. Because although there are apparently 1 in 10 women who have PCOS, it's just nobody's really getting diagnosed. And especially here in Britain, if you are diagnosed, there's just nobody talking about it. So I'm hoping that I can help you guys out, and that you can help me out too by sharing your experiences with me, and that hopefully we can create a little community where we can just support each other through this condition that we have to live with for the rest of our lives. So this is the point where I'd like to start telling you about my diagnosis journey. So where it started, and where we got to almost to here, and kind of go through that now. So this is the time where I need to not ramble. So I've got some notes to try and keep me on track, rather than spending an hour talking to you about all the things that happened, because if you've already been diagnosed, you know that it's a slap in the face at first, and so many emotions and dilemmas and overreactions as well, I think, that I'd love to go through all of that, but we shall save some of those for another video. So I got diagnosed, and the reason that I ended up being diagnosed was mainly a little bit of luck. So I'd been struggling a lot with my health, so I'd put on a lot of weight, and I knew that that was mainly down to my diet. I'd been working in the city centre, which meant I had access to food at lunchtimes and things, and I knew that although I would take some lunch with me that would be fairly healthy, fruit and veg, and all fairly balanced and lean proteins and all that kind of stuff, I was topping that up all the time with sweets and chocolate bars, with processed foods and breads, and I knew that my diet wasn't great. So all that weight going on, I was kind of like, I know why. I can put that down to a reasonable, lack of exercise and overeating a lot of bad things. And it got to a point where I started noticing that weight obviously then affecting my health. Just little things like finding it difficult to tie my shoes and when I'm bending over, although I can do it, it was that kind of, okay, but now it's difficult to breathe, and this is an uncomfortable and almost feels like an exercise in and of itself, and I'm tying my shoes. So I'd never had that before. So for me, that was one of the triggers where I was like, I need to do something about my weight here. I need to really take this seriously. So I went on to a diet plan that I had tried before. I'd found previously that the weight loss shakes I won't name companies because I'm embarrassed by some of them, and so I don't want to say who I used. But back in the day, I had tried a weight loss shake, and I'd found it incredibly successful at that point. I think maybe my insulin resistance wasn't quite so bad, and I was able to make my life a lot healthier in general and get a lot more exercise, and all those things combined meant I did actually lose weight. So when it came back to this point and I'd kind of come off that and I'd gone into this really unhealthy eating again, I thought, I know, I'll go on to a shake plan again. It was a different one because I needed to be more dairy free. I'd become incredibly volatilely lactose intolerant at that point. So I went with a vegan plan because, not because I'm a massive vegan, but because I knew that would guarantee me not only dairy free, but also a slightly higher quality in product. So I went for that at the time, and I mean, I didn't lose anything. I think probably at that time, because I've not always been really into weight, like what I actually weigh as a control, because I don't think it matters. That's not a realistic standard, if you know what I mean. That it's about how you feel physically and how you fit into your clothes. So I think maybe at that time I could say I didn't necessarily put on any more weight, but I sure as hell wasn't losing any either. So I got really disheartened and I couldn't understand. So I ended up just giving up and going back to the unhealthy lifestyle because of the massive disappointment. As anybody who has tried a diet that doesn't work knows, that's kind of one of the worst things that can happen. So of course I then ended up putting on even more weight, because not only was I eating terribly again and not getting a lot of exercise, I was also overeating out of depression that this thing hadn't worked. And that's when things like stretch marks and other joint issues and things, my hips became very painful, and I struggled. If I did want to do some exercise, one of the things I love to do is walking, so it's not strenuous, and I was finding then I didn't even want to do a normal walk because I was getting tired, and I just thought, no, this really has to stop. And at that point I then was changing my job. So this was a great opportunity for me because it meant I was out of the high street, so I didn't have access to any decent food suppliers or ones that I would want to use. So I was going to have to take all my own food, which meant I could really restrict all of the bad stuff out. I could take things with me, and I literally wouldn't have any other option, which was really good because I don't have great self-control. So that was going to really help me. But on top of that, I also had to walk a mile to and from work. So I was now walking 2 miles a day as of, I had to get to work, to get from the train station to my location at work. I had to walk a mile and then a mile back again. So this was great. I had increased exercise. I had control over my food in a way that, I didn't have before because I have no self-control. So I felt like this was a great opportunity for me to use that as a springboard to really get things moving. And that by doing a bit more exercise, that wasn't too much, it was only walking and it was only a couple of miles a day broken up. I felt like that would be a good way to start getting back into the healthy, getting back into the energy to then kind of increase. And it was a few months after that. And I remember in particular, there was this one time, and one of the things about the mile that I had to walk was that it went up from the train station, down to the main road, across the main road, and back up to my place of work. So although the station and my place of work were actually on a level, I had to go up and down the hill to get there, which was great because, obviously hill work is a bit more. So I thought, it's a good thing to have. But particularly at the end of the day, not so much in the morning, but getting into work. But when I'd finished work and I'd had a whole day of work and I'd only been able to eat what I'd brought with me, I really struggled to get back up that hill. I actually had to start leaving work a few minutes earlier because otherwise I was going to miss the train, because it took me so long to get up that hill. And I was doing that thing, when and there are other people walking around you and you're like, don't breathe so loud so they don't know how much you're struggling with this. It wasn't busy, so I didn't pass out from not breathing. But yeah, if somebody went past, I had to kind of hold my breath a little bit or just breathe very consciously so that they wouldn't notice how much I was puffing. Which, you know, is funny to look back on, but I do remember getting actually quite panicked at that point. The idea that this hill, I mean, it was fairly steep, but it wasn't very long, and I was struggling so much that I thought, shit, there is something really wrong. I need to get to a doctor about this, because, you know, my diet has changed, my exercise has increased, and if anything, I feel worse, not better. And I really started to think, you know, what is it that I've got? And I thought a lot about diabetes, because I've always drunken a lot. I've always had issues with being thirsty a lot. So I thought maybe I really have got diabetes this time, or I thought maybe it was something wrong with my thyroid or one of my other glands because of the weight. I knew that this was serious and it was something that I had to do. And so the reason I changed my job is because I moved. So I also had to get a new doctor, which was really lucky for me, because I happened to find a doctor who, when I went to her, and I was talking about what I really went there for was to get back onto the contraception pill, because I know that levels out my hormones. And I remember when I'll do a whole thing on the pill, because that's quite a journey in and of itself. But I'd come off it because I'd moved and not had a doctor, and I'd run out of the prescription. So I wanted to get back onto that. So that was one of the first things I wanted to talk to her about. And combined with that is obviously the acne that I have. So I wanted to talk to her about getting some treatment again, using a cream or an antibiotic to get my skin back under control, because that had gotten quite bad again. And then I wanted to talk to her about my weight gain. And I was just really lucky that I mentioned those three things, and she just went, "You've got polycystic ovarian syndrome?" I'm like, "Polycystic what?" I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. Now my mum and my nan and my aunt and even my sister have got all sorts of different problems with their menstrual cycle, and mine has been nothing like any of theirs. So you know, I'd heard of endometriosis and other things that can happen, but I'd had the easiest journey with my periods as opposed to everybody, all the other females on my mum's side of the family. So I never liked to complain much about them, because they were really easy. They were very infrequent and they were very light. So I just never even thought of it. So then when I came up with these other symptoms, because I also have some very bad acne on my back, and I've actually got 2 spots in particular that have turned into something really quite nasty. Most people actually think that they're moles on my back, and they're not. And I was concerned because I knew that they weren't moles. And I wanted to, you know, I had shown a doctor before and she was really like, "Me, it's just the spot, like, I don't know what you want me to do about it." So, I'd shown her that. And of course, that is a very testosterone-based acne problem. So men tend to get that more than we do in general, other than when you have polycystic ovaries. So it was all of those things that kind of gave her triggers for her to investigate that for me. So I didn't have to push, I didn't have to ask, I didn't have to do any research before she was happy to do the tests. I had those 3 symptoms and she said, "That sounds like polycystic ovarian syndrome to me. Let's just get you tested for that." So I know a lot of other people's stories are very different when it comes to actually finally getting a diagnosis. So I do feel very lucky for that. So obviously we did the tests, and my testosterone was high, and we did do an ultrasound, but they didn't actually see any cysts at that time, but they just did the outside one. So we don't know how many cysts I do or don't have, but I was really lucky in that process, being able to actually get a diagnosis. And obviously I went back onto the to the pill, and she offered me some metformin for the insulin resistance. So that was, I feel like that was really, when it came to my health and my diet, that was the real diagnosis, was actually that either due to or linked to, as a result of polycystic ovarian syndrome, I have got insulin resistance. And I think the key to getting back to feeling healthier is understanding what that does, how it affects your body, and how to work around it and support it, as well as supporting your hormones on the polycystic ovarian syndrome. So I think that's kind of the things I want to focus on the most, is those things, rather than kind of the fertility. And I know that it must, that, you know, that's a massive thing, is that the reduction in your fertility. But for me, I'm not looking to increase. In fact, it's kind of a benefit to me. So like, can't have kids, great. But I want to focus on being healthy, and I feel like for me the two things are balancing hormones and understanding and working around insulin resistance. So those are kind of the things that I'm going to be talking about, and I'll get into details of medications, supplements, diets. I'm going to do some kind of what I eat in a day, some recipe ideas, but they're going to be really in depth on what's actually in the food and why you want to eat those things. So it's not just about avoiding sugar and keeping that low and all that kind of stuff. It's also about the anti-inflammatory foods, good replacements for those sugar cravings that you have, and everything like that. So that's kind of the idea. That's what I want to talk about. Obviously, I'd love to hear from you if you've had a similar journey, or if you've heard of a similar journey. If you've got something that you want me to research, to talk about, to discuss, to focus on, then just let me know in the comments below. I'm going to be releasing about one video a week, because I work full time Monday to Friday, so I'm going to release one over the weekends. So obviously you need to hit subscribe so you can catch all the little journeys that I post. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week.